Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to take on another Shimano bait caster. This one is the Bantam Curado. It's the 200 size. It says it has 5-ball bearings. It's in because Brian had asked me to do a tune-up on this reel. And we'll do that. We'll take this apart completely. We'll show you how to work with this and how to tune it up. I am noticing that there's a little bit of line gathering to one side here. I'm not sure if we have a broken or a dirty pole or a dirty worm gear or something, or if it's just a curiosity that maybe when he was wrapping it to ship, the last couple of lines of the pieces in the rod just piled up to that side. Not sure. So we're going to take it apart, and taking it apart involves removing the handle and all exterior pieces. And while I do that, I want to thank our first responders and essential personnel, everybody in the medical fields and long-term care, acute care, in the hospitals and the intensive care wards, as well as the folks that are just in the administrative staffs and everything else that's dealing with COVID. Thank you very much for all that you do. You truly are our local hometown heroes, and it truly is appreciated. All right, well, we're backing this off here. I noticed that the spring assembly on the star adjuster is pushing forward, so remember that. And as I like to suggest, a couple of things as I get started on the videos. One is I wear a protective glove on my hand to keep the greases and oils off of it as much as I can. And the second thing is take pictures, because it's difficult to trust your memory all the time to be 100% right. And pictures will help you if you have that moment where you don't quite remember the order or the sequence of a particular piece, how it came off, how it went back on, what went first, and so on. The pictures are invaluable. Now I'm using a video camera here to do that. You don't need to take videos, but you can use your cell phone or a still camera or anything that is capable of taking a picture. That will help you navigate the way to reassembly. All right, so I mentioned there's a spring that came up, so we would expect to see a spring right below this. Notice on the underside of the star adjuster, there is a square. So the spring goes into the square, and then it's going to fit over this square nut here on the axle shaft or on the gear shaft. We should be able to just walk that piece off by hand. So that's the third piece coming up. And you can get an exploded view. You can go to the internet and you can request a schematic diagram for the Curado. You should be able to find it out there, and that'll give you an exploded view, so it'll tell you a little bit about what to expect as you take the pieces and parts off. And if the schematic is from a parts reseller, well, then you're going to be able to order a part should you have a need to do that. All right, there's one more little washer in there. So we have a square washer, and then we have a flat washer, and then we have 2 tension washers, one of which is still on the case. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 side plate screws. I also like to check underneath here, and I also like to check on the back here to see if there's a screw hiding behind the spool. So let's go do that. To remove this side plate, you lift up, in case any of you have this reel and were wondering why it says lift. Lift it up, and inside it'll tell you to open this just counterclockwise. That will remove the side plate. That's the inner race for this reel. That'll go into my parts tray. I use a parts tray, which is the bottom of a jug. Any old thing will do. You can have a commercial one if you like, or you don't have to have one at all, but regardless, I use a parts tray. There's one bearing on here. I'm going to use some fishing reel oil. In this case, I'm going to use the Lucas fishing reel oil. I'm going to oil that bearing. I'm going to use that because it has a nice little spout there that helps me get through the tight spots. There's also a bearing on this side, so let's take the time to put some oil on that as well. I oil the bearings. Some people like to put grease on them. I prefer the oil. I think the grease traps the dirt and erodes the performance of a bearing, but that's your choice. All right, now there's 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4 that I can see. I'm going to remove them, and I'm going to put them on my bench as I take these out. Now you may need a micro screwdriver here. There's a very fine slot in these. It seems like my number 1 Phillips head screwdriver is getting the job done. But if you have a worn Phillips head or it's not getting it done, just go to the micro driver. It's easier. Right, so far all of those screws are the same. And I'll just give you an example. I keep the micro drivers right on my desk just because if I need one, it's easy to get to. I don't have to go searching for it. So we'll do the last one with a micro driver here, just to show you that's equally effective. Alright, so one screw is longer. The case screw on the bottom here is longer than the other 3. That's why I laid them out. Now I'll put them into my parts tray. So one screw goes into the reel seat. We should just be able to remove that case now. And when I remove that case, I want to take that last tension washer so that I don't lose it. This is your last tension washer. And I just want to make sure that I put that with the other stack in my parts tray. Alright, so we have the back of the case, which has got your anti-reverse, and it also has a bearing underneath here in the spool. I'm going to oil the bearing. I am not going to oil that anti-reverse clutch. I get that question every now and then. The clutch is slipping. Why? Well, the clutch is not designed to be oiled, and sometimes the greases and the oils get in there, so sometimes they cause that to slip. It's a friction-driven system, so I like to make sure that this ferrule and that anti-reverse clutch are dry. That's going to cause the most friction. Take that, put that in. We've oiled the bearing here. We've cleaned the bearing there. The case is clean. There's just a little, I think that's grease here. There's a little bit of old grease, so we mop that up. So we put that inside. And now important, take the picture right here, because there's a lot going on in this reel, and you want to make sure that you're okay with it if you get stuck along the way. The first thing I like to do with these reels is remove the 2 yoke springs, because they have a tendency to fall out or shoot. And if they fall out and shoot, well, you're going to be on a search mission, and I prefer to fix the reels rather than search for the pieces and parts that I've dropped along the way. Now we can remove the main gear. Sometimes easier said than done. That's the main gear. We have a cog underneath here. After you've removed that gear stack, come on up and remove the yoke and the pinion gear. That'll expose the trip mechanism. So if we trip down on this now, it's going to push everything forward, and this is what the click ramp is going to engage to kick it back up in free spool. Like that. So we just want to make sure all of that gets oiled. We want to make sure it gets clean too. In this case it's just dry, it's very clean. Oil your worm drive gear as well. And the reason for that is that these are plastic, they're kind of self-lubricating, but you want to make sure that they have the oil to spin freely. Now if you wanted to remove this shaft, looks like quite the exercise, but there's 2 screws holding on a plate here with a C-clip underneath that. You can just barely see the C-clip in this. Not sure if it's kind of visible on the camera, but there's a C-clip right there if you want to remove your axle shaft. Alright, I'm just going to clean this up, because that's pretty much what a basic service is. It's take it apart, inspect the pieces and parts, and clean it up and put it back together again. Now, this is a good place that you should have noted. This is the downside of that cog that's going to drive that free spool release. So if you took a picture, you would be able to go back and reference it. One side has square shoulders, the other has rounded shoulders. One is kind of a buffed or polished, the other is kind of flat. And if you were paying attention, you would have seen that. So what's going to happen now is this is how your free spool is going to go. You're going to go into release mode. You'll see that it captures that corner there, and when you turn your gear, it's going to push it back up. So keeping it well oiled is going to make it an easy snap there. Alright, let's just clean this up. Another note while we clean this up, if you like these kinds of videos, And I'd ask you to subscribe. That way you can see the ones that I post. And if you hit notifications, you'll see all of them that I post, and you can decide which ones you want to watch and which ones may be relevant to you. All right, so we took this out, and there's another point where you may get confused. You're looking at this, say, oh my gosh, which way did it go? Did it go this way or did it go this way? And the answer is in the ramp on the yoke. You'll find corresponding angular ends to this yoke. They go in. They're going to be riding on the two side ramps here. Hopefully we can see this, but there's angular ramps here and a correspondingly angular ramp over here. So that's the side that goes to the front of the reel, or the spool side. You want to take this off. You want to inspect it. If there was any dirt in there, there's not, but if there was any dirt in there, find a hard brush, clean that dirt out. And then we want to grease this, because that's the other part. You want to clean and you want to grease. That's your basic service. You want to inspect and replace any worn parts. This yoke has a separate side to it with a slot in it. It's a cross-section slot. That's for the spool, so that's going towards the spool, as are those angular points. So this is going to mount this way, and then it's going onto the reel, cross-haired section in, just like that. So that's how that finishes. Next step then is just a check of the main gear. We'll do the same thing. We're going to inspect and take the drag washers out. You can easily poke them through. This has got the hard washer in it. You don't need to do anything with this. If it was dry or worn, you would note that. You can put some grease on this, but this is heavily greased already, so you don't need to do anything more here. Just clean out the center. You can see there's a little bit of debris in there, so some of it is a wear pattern, actually. We'll go ahead and put that back in. We're going to take our cap washer, put that on. And we're going to do the same thing with this gear that we just did with the other gear. We're going to inspect all those teeth. Going to grab our grease brush. And we're going to get a good amount of grease on there, because there's not a lot of grease that's been in this reel. Most of this reel is probably dried out, and that's probably why it's a little sluggish in performance there. So just make sure you get the grease on. You don't have to get it in every tooth. When you spin the reel, that smaller gear will spread it around, so don't worry terribly on that. Okay, now we're going to go back and reverse what we did. We're going to seat the main gear. This came out again, that's okay. On this side, there's a shiny side and a dull side. The shiny side goes up. Again, if you had a question, you can go back and just check how you did that. We have a ferrule that I cleaned the exterior of. We'll just make sure that the interior is clean, and I'm going to use a cotton swab for that to get any old greases out of there. Again, I want this outside dry, because that's going to work with the anti-reverse clutch, and the anti-reverse clutch is friction driven, so it needs to be dry. All right, that's it, except for those two screws that could have shot out if you weren't paying attention. So the two screws go back on next. And then we can go ahead and take the side plate and put that back on. We've oiled that bearing. We're just going to turn that over now. We're going to seat this side plate. Remember our 4 screws, one of them was long, and we said that the long one goes in the bottom. The other 3 are the same size and can go anywhere. Again, you can use a micro driver, or you can use a number 1 Phillips head if you need. If your number 1 Phillips head will grab that thread, that's fine. When I do this, I like to go high-low, side to side. I want to keep equal tension on this case as I do this. So if you have questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you leave those questions in the comments section, I do try to answer them. And it doesn't have to be on this reel. Maybe you're working on a reel and you're stuck, and you need an assist there. If I can help you, I will. I will guarantee you I will not know the answers to all of the questions, but if I know the answer, I'll try to help you. And if I don't know the answer, I'll try to point you in a direction where you can get that help. I just had one today from Chris. I don't know the answer to it, but we'll try and do some research on it. But for the most part, nobody knows all of it, that's for sure. Okay, it's spinning nicely. You can see that we're driving the line guide, and that's where I want to go next. I want to take that piece off here. These are plastic, so be careful. When you go, get a screwdriver that has the right width and dimension for the cap, because you don't want to spin that cap or break that cap or in some way compromise it. And also notice on this one of the things that I do not like about Shimano's caps are it's kind of got like a castle effect to it. It's got high and low points on that. Do not over tighten this on the way back in. If you do, you're going to break those little studs and your reel is going to be ineffective. I just want to pull this pawl out just because I saw the way that line was gathering. I want to check. There does seem to be some grease gathering in the corners here, so you want to get that grease off. What that will do is that will delay a turnaround on that pawl on the worm gear, and it could cause that line to be stacking over there. You also want to check on both sides, make sure that the teeth on that gear are equal. In this case they are, so I don't think we have a problem with the pawl. I think maybe it's just something else that has caused that little bit of line to gather that way. Looks like I didn't tighten that last one down. Alright, I like to oil the worm gear. Again, some people want to put grease on there. I prefer not to put the grease on there. And the reason for that, again, is if you get dirt, if you're fishing in a dirty or a dusty environment, or if you're fishing this one in salt water, that worm gear is exposed. And if you put the grease in there, it's going to pick that up, whether it's micro sand or it's going to pick up dust or it's going to pick up anything. And I generally do not like to see that stuff accumulate in the tracks and on that gear. Well, I'm struggling a little bit with this cap, but we will get it. You don't want to force anything, particularly plastic parts. Eventually you will get it. And hand tighten this. Again, remember those little prongs on here. So stay vigilant as you're kind of working this through. And then you have to make sure that you seat the pole. And that's not seated right now. There you go. And once you seat it, you should be able to tighten it down the rest of the way. And again, caution, do not over tighten that cap. Okay, we're going. It should be fine. Alright, so we're back to the spool again. We've oiled the bearing on the spool. We want to get a little bit of grease onto the spool shaft. A little bit of grease onto the back spool shaft there. This has got brakes that if you wanted to slow the speed of your spool, you would pull these brakes out. If you wanted to go faster, you would leave them in. These are all set in. And generally, I recommend that you'll find what's comfortable for you and set it and forget it. Don't constantly move it around. All right, now we want to just replace the spool. When you go to replace that spool, very easy to trap this line here in one side or the other. So make sure you're clear of that when you go to reset. All right, we've oiled the back end of this. Remember that lift thing here, right? And interestingly enough, if you can read that, it says when you lift that door open, it says open, turn it this way, close, turn it that way. So let's follow their instructions and close that down. And you're in good condition there. Now we would probably want to go to our pictures if we weren't paying attention earlier. We have two of these tension washers. They're not flat. They have a natural curve in them, or a curve by design. Those control the tension of your star adjuster. So I like to put them face to face, but that's for you to figure out if you want a sensitive star adjuster or if you just kind of want the normal. All right, next up then we put that flat washer. Then we put the bigger washer. Now we can put this in, and again, generally you can turn this by hand. You don't need to try and set the star adjuster that way. And the more you can turn by hand, the easier it's going to be to set that star adjuster. Remember, the star adjuster's got that flat or squared section to it. So the spring goes on first. Now you're going to push down and you're going to try to approximate where that is so that you can get that square seated. And then once you get lucky like I just did, you'll see that you've closed the gap there, and now you can go ahead and put the handle on. Handle goes on. Handle nut goes on. Again, we're doing most of this hand tightening, at least to start. You can use the wrench, but be careful. These are brass parts, even a brass screw. That's good because it'll stand up to corrosion, but it's not so good in terms of strength versus some of the others. So just be careful as you go to set that. Last up then is this cap. Generally speaking, if this is aligned with that hole, kind of parallel, you will be able to get the cap and the screw on. And if it's not, well, take the screw out and see where you missed and just kind of play around a little bit with that. But in this case, we didn't miss. Next up then, tighten down the star adjuster. It's ready for a spin. Oh, that's a whole lot smoother than it was when it came in. I like that a lot. So a little bit of grease, a little bit of oil. This one's ready to go fishing again. Make sure you have your free spool. Drop that down. Give it a spin. Spinning nicely. So I like the Shimanos where your line guide does not move in casting. Now the only way that it's effective, generally speaking, is if before you cast, you center the line guide with the center of the spool like I've just done here. That's the least amount of drag you're going to get while casting. If you have it spun all the way over to a side, well, when the line is on this side, you're casting and it's going in this direction, it's going to put a lot of tension there, and it's going to slow the output of the line. So just a general idea for you. If you're casting, center the line guide to the center of the spool. That'll give you the most friction-free casting that you'll be able to get out of this reel. Okay, so we're there on that. We're spinning. It works nicely. It's ready to go fishing again. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like it. Again, if you want to see more, please subscribe. And again, if you're a first responder, essential personnel, involved in the medical field and practices, thank you for everything that it is you're doing to keep us safe and well. So please stay well, stay watching. Have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.